Well, thank you. My name is Etienne Liberté. I'm with Employment and Social Development Canada. I'm part of the HR Services branch, and I work for the HR Innovation team. The topic of my presentation today is improving the employee experience through data, and I will do that in three different ways. The first of which is I'll take you back to about a year and a half ago when our Assistant Deputy Minister of HR asked our team to come up with a long-term aspirational vision for HR at ESDC. And my team undertook some research work that was basically fell into two categories. One category was a strategic foresight work undertook by my colleagues, which led to the definition of a preferred future for employees at ESDC. And in that preferred future that you see in the upper half of the screen, there is the upper left quadrant that talks about human experience, of which employee experience is a subset. And I undertook another piece of the work the result of which you find at the bottom. And that work consisted in interviews that I conducted with HR leaders across the public service. So 203 interviews with 215 people from 42 federal organizations. That produced about 100 hours of recorded material, or if you prefer, 700 pages of transcript. When we start analyzing the transcript of these interviews, a lot of concept emerged. Data was one key aspect that emerged that you can see in the left. In the image on the left, it was the most frequently mentioned topic by respondents. And from all this mass of information, we kind of synthesized the findings or the takeaways in 10 key takeaways. That was still a little much for people to assimilate. So we organized those 10 takeaways along two axes. One horizontal axis that you can imagine as being on the left, smaller, more immediate challenging opportunities that departments face right now. And to the right, larger, more ambitious challenging opportunities that may make HR more relevant for the future. And on the vertical axis, you get at the bottom issues for which departments have a fairly low level of autonomy or control, and where they're more dependent on the work of central agencies or horizontal collaboration among all departments. And at the top, issues for which individual departments have a high level of autonomy and control. And in that upper right quadrant were the key issues that we thought mattered the most for HR in the long term. And those issues fell in three categories: user centricity, HR digitalization, and data and evidence-based decision making. I have a talk on YouTube that I'll point you to at the end where I expand on the findings of these, but you can look at these three concepts as in a number of ways. You can look at them as strategies that your organization may want to pursue to create a better employee experience. You can look at them as capabilities that your organization must develop to get the work that will allow a better employee experience. And finally, if you're really bold, you can even think of those as potentially a new structure for HR branches in your organization that reflect perhaps a little less of the traditional disciplines of HR and a little more the integrated work that must happen in the future if we want indeed to improve the employee experience. So that is one model that emerged from our research. It is not definitive by any means. Employee experience has been a topic that I've seen surface probably for the first time around 2014, 2015. More and more models and frameworks are popping up. Some are really interesting and allow us to think differently about the employee experience. But the most common ways to look at employee experience is still to look at the different processes that we have in an organization and map them along the life cycle of the employee, starting with pre-hiring and even employer branding at the beginning of the life cycle to offboarding and perhaps retirement at the end. And in between the beginning and the end of this employee life cycle, we find a number of moments or processes that affect the quality of the experience of the employees. And some of these processes create more friction, pain, and frustrations than others. And I would suggest that these processes that create more friction, frustration, and pain may be a good place where to start. And I would like to give you four quick examples of work that our HR innovation team has been looking into during the past year. One of the process that is a topic of a lot of discussion is recruitment and staffing. And at the beginning of the summer, Service Canada in the Quebec region approached us because they had just completed a very large recruitment process for which they received over 6,000 applications. And the senior leadership of the Service Canada in the Quebec region was interested in knowing what did the candidates think of that staffing process that we just administered to them. So they approached us to conduct the research. And as we were finding our way in that process, we quickly realized, well, we never asked for the consent of applicants when they applied on the poster to use their personal information for research purposes. So very quickly, we got in touch with the privacy office of the department and start drafting a consent notice that we could include in the future on all job posters so that in the future we can research the candidate experience of any job poster, any job opportunity, internal or external in the government. Now that is probably going to set a precedent. So that consent notice is currently being examined by the Public Service Commission. But as soon as it gets a green light, it will allow us to do some really interesting research work that provide us better insight into the candidate experience. Another topic that creates a lot of friction and frustration is the pre-onboarding and onboarding of new employees. And you can think of pre-onboarding as all the work that happens between the hiring decisions and day one on the job, and onboarding being from day one on the job, perhaps until a few months or the end of the first year. ESDC, Employment and Social Development Canada, in the fiscal year 2020-2021, hired over 5,000 employees. And it came to the attention of senior management that the onboarding experience of some of these employees had been less than optimal, let's put it mildly. And they asked the HR branch to take the leadership in improving the onboarding process. And there was a team that was tasked with coming up with quick wins to improve the onboarding process. And obviously, whenever you talk about quick wins, people are very, very inclined to jump straight to solutions without really taking the time to define the problems. And when they came to us for ideas of quick wins, that was the number one advice we gave to them. Don't jump to solution. First, try to define the problem that you're trying to solve. And one way to define it may be, given the volume of applicants or new employees we've had in the department, maybe simply to administer a survey to those new employees. And thankfully, that's what the team did. And they administered a survey that they sent to 5,000 people. About a third of the new employees responded to the survey. And the findings, the data collected in that survey really allowed us to get a better understanding of where are the key pain points. For example, some people were not even being equipped in the first day, in the first weeks, in the first months with the right computer, the phone, the VPN access, and things like that. Knowing that, we know where to target our efforts to improve the onboarding experience. There were also a few open text questions in that survey that gave us insight into what it's like, what matters to an employee, what do they actually want from an onboarding process. For example, there was a question when we asked employees, what would have contributed positively to your onboarding experience? And many of the answers that we saw had to do with just the fact that someone was there to help the new employees find their ways in the first few days, first few weeks. And that someone, in some cases, could be the hiring managers, but it could also be an administrative assistant, it could be a teammate, it could be HR, but someone was giving them the guidance, the help, pointed them to the right resource, helping them figure their way in the first few days, few weeks on the jobs. And knowing that, it also already starts helping us figure out what could be some potential solutions we could implement to improve the new employee onboarding experience. Another area of interest that our team looked into is performance management. And here we decided to do something original. We decided to look at the current performance ratings that we have in a department and apply so the performance ratings are done once a year as part of the annual performance appraisal, but we decided to apply an employment equity lens on it. And normally you should expect performance ratings to be evenly distributed regardless of the employment equity group that someone may belong to. However, that is not what we're finding. We're finding some interesting differences, not only between functional group types of jobs, but also between levels within a functional groups, and even within the same level of the same functional group, differences from one employment equity group to another. So this work is ongoing as we speak, but it's already pointing to some future work of research that we might want to do, where it would be really interesting to hold focus group with some employment equity communities within our department to better understand what it is like for employees to be part of the performance management process. I'm going to skip over the last one because as I'm talking, my colleagues are delivering a webinar where they're sharing the findings of some research work they did about pay and compensation and trying to better understand what the employee experience was like when it came to pay and compensation services. I've just presented a bunch of ways that we can look at data that you already have in your position or collect new data to gain better understanding of the employee experience. But another potential use of data is to use certain types of data for establishing a baseline and then measuring the improvements that you are making as you implement change to improve the employee experience. I'm going to draw on some work that I did years ago at Fisheries and Oceans Canada. I was working for the law enforcement branch over there. And between the years of 2005 and 2008, we did a lot of work to improve people management practices. A lot of work was done on speeding up staffing and simplifying it, onboarding, improving communication from senior management, and performance management. Now, the beauty with the work that was done is that right before starting it, the public service employee survey that used to be administered every 3 years had just been administered a month prior to us undertaking that work. So we had a baseline of what the situation from the perspective of the employees was like in the organization. And we knew that there was low engagement, low morale, and basically distrust between employees and management. But 3 years later, when we re-administered the public service employee survey, we were able to uncover some very interesting findings. What you have on the screen here are just some of the questions from the public service employee survey. The line in light orange are the results we obtained in 2005, and in dark orange was the additional improvements we were able to generate during those 3 years. And you can, it was a clear indication that we were on the right track with all these little tweaks we were making to staffing, to onboarding, to performance management, and most importantly, to communication coming from senior management. I say that I use that example because if you look at the, I think it's the second to last line on the graph, it's the clarity of communication coming from senior management, and we tripled the number of or the percentage of employees that agree that we were doing an effective job as with regards to that. So data can be really useful to measure the progress that you're making on any given issue. While I'm on the topic of employee survey, I just want to make a few observations before closing, wrapping up my presentation. But these employee survey have to be used beyond reporting. They can serve both as a baseline for future improvement and help identify where specifically to intervene to have the most impact. But so there's an opportunity to do more with the analytics provided by the data from this survey. But to achieve that, we need access to the raw data. And if I have any colleagues from OCRO, or the Office of the Chief HR Officer at Treasury Board Secretariat, listening to this call, please try to give the managers the insights they need to know exactly where to intervene, on what variables to act so that it can improve employee engagement. And maybe the answer is that departments need access to the raw data that OCRO has in its position. Another takeaway from the survey is that we need to share the data and the insight with the people who can most directly influence the employee experience, and those are the managers, the line managers, and the team leaders. Unfortunately, line managers and team leaders are often the last one to be made aware of the findings of these surveys. So we need to improve that. And lastly, I hear a lot about survey fatigue. I disagree. There's no such thing as survey fatigue, especially when you act on the feedback that you're collecting and the data that you are analyzing, and decide to fix the issues raised by employees. No employees will say, I am so tired of the department always asking me survey because every time I raise an issue, they fix it. You'll never hear that. So that's a wrap up for the presentation today. Feel free to get in touch with me. I share a lot of the work that me and my team produce on GC Collab. If you're a federal public servant, you'll find my group there. But I also have some interesting content on my YouTube channel. Just type my name on YouTube. You'll get to my channel. And there are a few of the talks that I point to right here that may be of interest if you want to learn more about the things that I alluded to in this presentation. Thank you for your time.